I was sitting in the crowded lobby of Riverbend General Hospital when my phone buzzed. My hands were trembling because the doctor had just told me I needed more tests. I thought the call would be from the lab. But when I looked down, I saw the name I loved most, calling Maya, my only daughter. I answered with a tired smile. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice cut me like glass. "Mom, listen, Liam and I are leaving for Dubai tomorrow. We need a fresh start. So I sold your mountain cabin and your SUV today. We needed the money. Just letting you know. Bye." And she hung up. Just like that. No explanation, no shame, no hesitation. 48 years I raised that girl. 48 years of sacrifice, double shifts, burnt dinners, cold winters, and lonely holidays. I gave her everything, maybe too much. And she discarded me in a 12-second phone call. My name is Elena Rowan. I'm 68 years old, and until that moment, I thought I had a daughter. I was wrong. I had a parasite who had finally outgrown her host. But as I sat there, surrounded by coughing patients and flickering fluorescent lights, something incredible happened. I smiled. Not because I was okay, not because it didn't hurt, but because Maya didn't know what I knew. She thought she emptied my life. She had no idea she had just walked into a trap that she herself set years ago. I almost laughed in that silent waiting room. The husband who left me rich without telling me. 6 months earlier, my husband Jonas died in his sleep. One peaceful night, after a warm dinner and a discussion about the town's new mayor, he closed his eyes and never opened them again. He had always been quiet, gentle, and secretive about money. When he died, Maya cried for a full hour, then asked, "So, what did Dad leave behind? Anything important?" At the time, I genuinely believed Jonas had left us almost nothing. He worked as a math teacher, and our life was simple. But what I didn't know was this. 3 days before he died, Jonas gave me a sealed brown envelope. He held it in both hands. "Evie, one day, when you feel strong, not before, open this. Trust me." I placed it inside my wardrobe drawer and forgot about it. Until today. Until Maya's betrayal burned through my veins like wildfire. When the doctor finally called me back into his office, he said my blood pressure was high, understandably, but everything else was fine. "Just rest, Mrs. Rowan," he said. Rest? I didn't need rest. I needed answers and revenge. The envelope that changed everything. The moment I got home, I kicked off my shoes and went straight to my bedroom. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a growing hunger for the truth. I opened the wardrobe. There it was, the envelope. Still sealed, still waiting. I sat on my bed, took a deep breath, and tore it open. Inside were property deeds, stock certificates, bank account documents, a handwritten letter, and one key I didn't recognize. I unfolded the letter, and the moment I saw Jonas's handwriting, my eyes blurred with tears. The letter that broke me. "My dearest Evie, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Forgive me for not telling you everything before. For 30 years, I invested our small savings in real estate and tech stocks. We own more than you know. The mountain cabin is just one property. You also own the Lakeshore apartment complex, the Redwood Retail Plaza, the 4 condos near Harbor Street, and the Rowan storage facility. The company that owns everything is under my name. When I pass, it becomes yours. But Evie, never tell Maya. She has Liam's influence now, and they cannot be trusted. This wealth could destroy her if she's not careful. When the time comes, protect yourself, and protect her from herself. Love always, Jonas." I covered my mouth. The room spun. I wasn't poor. I wasn't abandoned. I was a silent millionaire, and my daughter had just stolen the two cheapest items I owned. But I didn't feel joy. I felt something else. Power. Cold, clean, quiet power. Jonas had set everything up. He knew this day might come, and I was done being the soft mother who folded under guilt. The phone call that confirmed everything. The next morning, Maya called again. Her voice was suddenly sweet, fake sweet. "Mom, just letting you know, we sent you 25% of the sale money. It's not much, but it should help you get a smaller place." A smaller place? As if she were a stray dog she was finding a shelter for. "And we're flying tonight," she added. "Liam says Dubai is full of opportunities. I'll text you the details." Then she giggled, as if she hadn't robbed me blind. "Okay, Maya," I said softly. "Have a safe flight." "Oh, good, you're not mad," she said. Then she hung up. If only she knew. If she had any idea. But I wouldn't tell her. Not yet. Because the moment she boarded that plane, I began constructing her downfall. I called attorney Samuel Carter, the man who helped with Jonas's small funeral paperwork. "Mrs. Rowan, are you all right?" he asked. "I found something," I said. "I need to come in." He scheduled an appointment immediately. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Dark blue dress, hair up, modest makeup. Not glamorous, but strong. When Samuel saw the documents, he froze. "Mrs. Rowan," he whispered, "do you understand what this means?" "Yes." "You are wealthy, extremely wealthy." "I know." "And the cabin, your daughter had no right to sell it. It was not legally in her name." "I know." He blinked. "So, do you want to reclaim it? File charges?" "No," I said. "I want you to stay quiet." He leaned in. "Mrs. Rowan, what exactly do you plan to do?" I smiled. "I plan to teach my daughter a lesson she will never forget." His eyebrows shot up. "And I need you," I added, "to help me recover everything she took, quietly, and then set the stage for what comes next." Samuel nodded slowly. "Whatever you need, Mrs. Rowan, I'm with you." Good, because I wasn't done. I was just getting started. Over the next 3 weeks, Samuel reversed the sale of the mountain cabin. The SUV was retrieved from a buyer who didn't want legal issues. My properties were officially transferred into my name alone, and Maya remained blissfully unaware in Dubai. Meanwhile, she didn't call me even once. Not to check on my health, not to ask if I was eating, not to see if I had a place to live. She had gotten what she wanted, a life without me. Perfect. Because when she returned, she would return to a mother she didn't recognize. One afternoon, my neighbor Helen knocked on my door. "Evelyn, have you heard?" "Heard what?" "Liam's company in Dubai collapsed. There's talk he scammed investors, and Maya's been left stranded with no money." I inhaled sharply. Helen continued, "The rumor is she's coming home next week. Alone." Alone. The word tasted sweet. Maya was running back to the mother she threw away. And she had no idea she was running into the arms of a woman holding all the cards. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Maya arrived looking like a ghost. Thin, pale, bruised ego, broken pride. She carried one torn suitcase, dragging it across the pavement like a defeated soldier. When I opened the door, she stared at me with red, swollen eyes. "Mom, can I come in?" "Of course, honey," I said softly. She sobbed into my arms for a full minute. "I'm sorry, Mom. I messed up. Liam left me. Everything is gone. Can I please stay here for a while?" "Of course." She looked shocked that I said yes. But she didn't know. She didn't know I already owned the apartment she used to live in, the storage unit she used to rent, and every asset Liam had tried to borrow against. And very soon, she would learn. Maya's first night back home was so quiet I could hear her heartbeat through the walls. She kept tossing and turning, crying softly into her pillow. Part of me felt that familiar tug, the instinct to comfort her. But then I remembered her cold voice in the hospital waiting room. "I sold your cabin and your car. We needed the money." That memory was enough to harden my heart again. I let her cry. Her tears were the beginning of her education. The next morning, the lie starts crumbling. When I walked into the kitchen at 7 a.m., Maya was already there, sitting at the table with her head in her hands. Her phone buzzed with notifications. She looked terrified. "Mom, have you checked the news?" "No." Wordlessly, she turned her screen toward me. A headline glared back. "Fire. Dubai investment heist. Liam Keller named prime suspect in multi-million fraud. U.S. authorities seek statements from his wife, Maya Rowan." I leaned back, hiding my smile. "Jonas, wherever you are, look at this." Maya's voice cracked. "They think I'm involved. Me? I didn't know Liam was doing any of this. Mom, they think I helped him." "Did you?" "Oh my God, no. I didn't even know he had debt. I didn't know anything." "Exactly. She never knew anything because she never cared to. She trusted Liam blindly and abandoned the woman who raised her. Now she was discovering the weight of her choices, publicly. The world turns against her. An hour later, the police knocked. Maya screamed, "Mom, what do I do?" "Answer the door," I said calmly. 2 officers stood outside with a stack of papers. "Miss Rowan, we need you to come in tomorrow to give a formal statement regarding Mr. Keller's fraud accusations." Maya turned pale. I didn't do anything wrong." "That's what we need to determine," the officer replied. I stood behind her quietly. Innocent mother, broken daughter. Exactly the image I wanted the world to see. When the door closed, Maya collapsed into a chair. "Mom, please help me. Please." Her eyes were begging. But I wasn't ready to help. Not yet. The first public humiliation. Later that afternoon, I told Maya we needed groceries. She insisted on coming with me. She wanted fresh air. Fresh air. I kept the thought to myself. We entered the local supermarket, and immediately the whispers started. "That's her. Isn't that the girl involved in the Dubai scandal? I heard her husband stole millions. She sold her mother's house and ran off." Maya's steps grew slower. Her cheeks flushed red. An older woman passing by muttered loudly, "I hope your mother forgives you someday. Mine never would have." Maya almost dropped the basket. Good. Let her feel the burn of shame. I didn't protect her from the whispers. I didn't soften anything. She walked beside me like a thief exposed to the village. It was her first taste of public humiliation. And we were just getting started. The friend who turned on her. At checkout, Maya suddenly froze. There, behind us, stood Claire Walters, her old high school friend. Rich, perfect hair, perfect husband, perfect Instagram life. Claire smirked. "Oh my God, Maya, you're here? I thought you were living in Dubai in luxury." Maya swallowed hard. "It's complicated." Claire looked at me. "Mrs. Rowan, I'm so sorry your daughter dragged your name into all this." "Dragged?" Her lips trembled. "Claire, please, it wasn't like that." "Oh no, sweetie, you don't have to explain. Everyone knows you and Liam were living off your mom's property money." Maya gasped. "Who told you that?" Claire smiled in a way only fake friends can. "Everyone. It's all over Facebook." Maya looked at me, eyes wide with horror. But I simply said, "Come on, Maya, let's go." Let her drown in humiliation. Let every word hit her like cold blades. This was necessary. The contractor's visit. Reveal number 1. When we got home, a pickup truck was parked outside with a sign on the door. Rowan Properties, Maintenance Division. Maya blinked. Mom, Rowan? Like Dad's last name? Yes. The contractor walked up to me cheerfully. Mrs. Rowan, we finished repairs on the Lakeshore apartment complex. Here's the invoice and the updated tenant list. He handed me a thick folder. Maya stared. Mom, why would our name be on? Thank you, I said to the contractor. He smiled. And don't worry, we'll handle the Redwood Plaza next week. When he left, Maya turned to me slowly. Mom, what properties is he talking about? You'll know when you're ready. I am ready. No, Maya, I said softly. But you will be. Her frustration grew, and anger flickered in her eyes. Good. Anger sharpens the mind. More revelations were coming. The lawyer calls at the perfect time. That evening, Samuel called. I put it on speaker. Mrs. Rowan, he said, good news. We've officially reversed the illegal sale of the mountain cabin. It's legally yours again. Maya's jaw dropped. Wait, what? Reversed? But I sold it. No, Miss Rowan, Samuel said. You tried to sell something you didn't legally own. She stared at me. Mom, what is he talking about? You'll see, I said. But Samuel continued. And the SUV has been returned as well. Maya grabbed my arm. How did you get all that back? How, Mom? Later, I said. She was shaking now. Confused, ashamed, terrified. Perfect. Because tomorrow would be the day the world watched her fall apart. The interrogation, public consequence. The next morning, we walked into the police station. People stared. Reporters hovered outside the door like vultures. Miss Rowan, are you involved in the Dubai financial crime? Did you help your husband? Did you use your mother's assets illegally? Is it true you sold property that wasn't yours? Maya covered her face as cameras flashed. Exactly what she deserved. A female officer escorted her into an interrogation room. I waited outside. Calm, collected, prepared. 30 minutes later, Maya came out shaking violently. They think I forged signatures, she whispered. Did you? I asked calmly. No. But Liam did. She nodded miserably. Yes. And you? Yes. And you followed him anyway? I was stupid, Mom, she sobbed. I trusted the wrong man. And untrusted the right one. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing harder. People in the lobby stared. Another public humiliation. Another lesson. After leaving the police station, Maya said she needed to talk to someone at the bank about freezing her accounts. Fine, let's go. At the bank, the teller typed her name, then frowned. Ma'am, you don't own the Harborview apartment anymore. Maya's breath hitched. What? That's my apartment. I paid rent there for 3 years. The teller looked uneasy. Your rent was paid by Rowan Holdings, ma'am. The property belongs to that company. Maya blinked. Rowan Holdings? She turned slowly toward me. That's Dad's name. Yes. Mom, do you own Harborview? Yes. And the cabin? Yes. And the plaza? Yes. And all of it, Maya. What? She screamed. The entire bank turned to look. Good. Another public reveal. Another brick in the wall of humiliation. I leaned closer to her and whispered, You sold nothing. You stole nothing. Because nothing was yours to take. Maya staggered backward like she'd been shot. The final public crash. Reveal number 3. That night, I took Maya to Samuel's office. She needed to hear the truth, to her face, with witnesses. Samuel laid out every document on the table. The company Jonas built, the deeds, the accounts, the stocks, the ownership transfers, the protective clauses Jonas wrote specifically to keep her away. Maya's mouth fell open. Mom, this says you're worth over $9 million. Yes. And Dad left all of it to you? Yes. And none to me? Not while Liam was influencing you, I replied.
Maya dropped into a chair, shaking. "But why didn't you tell me? Why?" Samuel answered before I could. "Because you would have handed everything to Liam. He was already forging your signature. He would have bled you and your mother." Maya burst into tears. "Mom, did you let me suffer on purpose?" "Yes." The words sliced through the room like a blade. Maya stared at me in disbelief. "You let me be humiliated? You let me get interrogation? You let the town talk about me? You let me feel worthless?" I stepped forward. "You made yourself worthless when you sold me for Liam's dream," I said quietly. "And you needed to understand consequences." She sobbed so loudly the building echoed. People walking past the hallway stared inside Samuel's glass office. Maya buried her face in her hands. Broken, exposed, and finally, teachable. Her public fall was complete. The next morning,
Her public fall was complete. The next morning, every neighbor knew everything. Why? Because Maya had screamed my name in front of a dozen people in the law office lobby. Because she had cried in the police station. Because she had collapsed in the bank. Her downfall was public. And now? Now she was ready. Ready to learn. Ready to rebuild. Ready to face everything she destroyed. Which meant it was time for phase 2, the rebuilding. But not on her terms. On mine. The town council meeting was packed like a theater on opening night. Word travels fast when there's scandal and drama. Reporters sat in the front row. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years filed in, faces full of curiosity. Claire was there, of course, sitting with a smug expression, like a person waiting for a show to begin. Samuel called it a public hearing to settle disputes about the Lakeshore apartment complex tenant complaints and to announce the legal reversion of several sales. He said the town had the right to be informed. The town, it seemed, wanted more than information. They wanted spectacle. I sat in the second row, reserved and perfectly composed. Maya sat beside me in shabby clothes that screamed bankruptcy, but her eyes were already starting to harden. That frightened me. Part of me wanted her to remain weak. Part of me wanted her to see herself rise without me doing everything. The city clerk began with the formalities. Then Samuel stood and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice carrying, "we are here today to clarify the ownership of certain properties previously sold under questionable circumstances. This includes the Lakeshore apartment complex and the mountain cottage sold last month. The legal documents have been reviewed. The rightful owner is Mrs. Evelyn Rowan." Whispers like a field of winded grass rolled through the hall. Cameras flashed. Maya's face went from despair to confusion and then to panic. "Mrs. Rowan?" the mayor asked, leaning forward. "If you'll step up to the podium, we can record your statement for the public record." So I did. I walked slowly. My dress was modest, but my posture said otherwise. I was not a victim. I was a force. When I reached the podium, every eye pinned to me. I put my hands on the wood and looked at my daughter for the very first time in public, really looked at her, not as the child who once clung to my skirts, but as a woman who had made terrible choices. "Maya," I said, voice calm so the whole room could hear. "You sold a place built by hands you could not begin to understand. You took what you were told was necessary. You left me with a phone call." She flinched. People leaned in. "But you also learned something," I continued, "which is why I'm not asking the police to lock you in a cell. I'm asking this town to watch what happens when a person chooses accountability over excuses." Claire gasped dramatically, as if the words had pricked her. A ripple of murmurs circled the room. "She's keeping her daughter? She's not pressing charges?" "Yes," I said, when the mayor asked. "No criminal charges from me. However, there are conditions." Samuel then produced a packet and read aloud a paragraph that made the room quiet.
The Rowan Trust, he said, created by Jonas Rowan on March 15th, includes a clause that grants the trustee the authority to withhold direct access to assets from any beneficiary deemed to be under the influence of another adult acting in bad faith. The trustee, Mrs. Evelyn Rowan, retains the right to set conditions for the release of funds and property to beneficiaries. In essence, the beneficiary must demonstrate sustained independence and responsible behavior for a period of 1 year before access is restored. Maya's face crumpled. "So, you mean you'll keep the money?" she whispered. "I mean," I answered, "that I will not hand you the keys to a life you sold for a man who lied. If you want access to your future, you will have to earn it. Not from me, through your actions." The public reaction was electric. Some cheered, others looked scandalized. Claire looked furious, mouth a thin line. For the first time, the smugness that clung to her began to peel away. Samuel continued, "There is one more clause to disclose. Any beneficiary who commits fraud or sells assets unlawfully is required to undergo mediation and community service before restoration is considered. The family must undergo a restorative process that includes community work, financial education, and a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing." Maya could not breathe. "This is humiliating," she said, voice breaking. "You're making me a spectacle." "You made yourself a spectacle the moment you sold the house without asking," I replied. "If you prefer to be ashamed in private, that was your earlier choice. Now the town will see your effort to rebuild, or it will see your refusal." The council adjourned with an air of finality. People filed out with their verdicts already decided in their heads. Some shook my hand on the way out and offered awkward condolences. Some patted Maya's shoulder like a benevolent judge presiding over a penitent. On the steps, Claire confronted us. "You made her work for it? You're cruel."
"She will work," I said. "She will learn, or she will not. Either is better than letting her float in a world built on others' efforts." Claire laughed with a disdainful sniff. Maya leaned her head on my shoulder as we walked home. For a second, she was small, human, and not the enemy. "I don't want to do community service," she whispered. "I don't want people to stare. I don't want to be the headline." "You have a choice," I told her. "You can choose to hide in shame and stay the person who sold me, or you can choose to show up, take responsibility, and build a life you can face in the mirror." Something in her shifted. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was a minute squeeze of her hand around mine. That small squeeze told me the fight had started inside her too. The ultimatum. Back at home, while the kettle sang, I laid out the conditions in a neat list. No theatrics, just instructions. Community service. 200 hours assisting the shelter we will create at the beach cottage. Cleaning, administration, meals, and counseling intake. Financial education. Weekly classes with Mr. Carter or a certified advisor. Complete a written plan showing savings, expenses, and job prospects within 3 months. Employment. Obtain a job and keep it for at least 6 months. No reliance on the trust funds for living expenses during this period. Public apology. A statement to the tenants and the town acknowledging the harm caused by the illegal sale and the mistakes made. Restorative meeting. A mediation with the buyers of the cabin and the SUV to offer restitution where appropriate. "You signed this?" Maya asked, incredulous, as if I were some cruel schoolmistress collecting debts. "No," I said, "you sign it. If you refuse, you forfeit any future claim." She stared at the list like it was a riddle. "I can do it," she whispered. "You can," I replied, "and I will help you, but not by giving you an easy path." She nodded slowly. The nod was the tiniest thing, but it was a hinge, a crack in the old shell. Seeds of transformation. The first week of community service was the hardest. We turned the old beach cottage, once a shrine to summers, into a working shelter. There were donations and paint buckets and volunteers who came with hands and judgment.
The women who stayed at the shelter had stories that Maya's fabrications looked like a child's game. They had been abandoned, manipulated, threatened, and they were not impressed by anyone who had traded their life for a foreign dream. On her first day, Maya sat in a small office trying to learn the intake forms. Her hands shook as she wrote names. A woman named Rosa arrived with 2 kids, eyes raw and staring. Rosa had a voice like gravel and a laugh like armor. She told Maya her story over soup: abusive partner, kicked out, with nothing, 2 toddlers clinging to the hem of her skirt. "You don't know what it feels like to have nothing," Rosa said quietly, not angry, just matter of fact. Until you do. Maya asked about jobs, about schooling, about help. She sat with Maya on the couch, and for the first time, truly for the first time, she listened without flinching, without thinking of herself. When Rosa left that night with a bag of groceries and a sleepover plan for the kids, Maya stood in the doorway like someone waiting to be taught how to breathe. That night she cried in private, not for herself, but for everything she had missed, the fragile people she had ignored in pursuit of shiny promises. "I didn't know," she said to me later. "I didn't know what was happening to those women. I was so blind." "You were choosing not to see," I corrected gently. "Choice still matters." "I don't want to be that person anymore," she whispered. "Then act differently." Action, not words. That would be the test. The town reacts. Word spread. A few neighbors peeked in to volunteer, skeptical, then softened. Claire rolled her eyes at first, but eventually donated a box of brand new towels to the shelter. The local paper ran an article titled "From Scandal to Shelter, Rowan's Rebuild," with a photo of Maya carrying a crate into the cottage. Public opinion, fickle as honey, began to stir. Some called the move manipulative, others called it brave. But more important than public opinion was the slow internal change I saw in my daughter. She started arriving early for shifts. She learned the names of residents. She learned to iron a shirt without snapping or sighing. She learned to listen to a woman explain a jumble of appointments and threads and run home and lay awake counting the cost of her past choices. One evening, as Rain stitched the windows with silver thread, Maya came into the kitchen with a small stack of envelopes. "I applied for 4 jobs today," she said. "One was at a social services agency, interview next week. I called 3 landlords about small rooms to rent when we renovate. I I spoke to Rosa about her case. She trusts me." Her voice had a new steadiness. It wasn't perfect. It trembled like a lamp in wind, but the light was there. I poured tea and watched her. Jonas's letter lay on the counter where I'd placed it to remind myself why I had to be both mother and judge. His words had given me the means. My choices were how I taught my daughter to wield it. "What if I fail?" Maya asked suddenly. "Then you fail with dignity," I said. "You try again, and I'll be here to see you try." She looked at me with something like gratitude and something like fear. "How can you be so calm?" she asked. "How could I not be?" I answered. "I lived with Jonas. I trusted him. I followed what he left me. Now we follow what we choose." Maya wrapped her hands around the cup like a person warming cold fingers. Outside, the rain softened its voice. Inside, the house hummed with the first notes of something like healing. A warning in the mailbox. Just when the air began to smell like new paint and second chances, an envelope arrived in the mail with our address. I opened it and found a single page, a note scrawled in bold black letters. "Watch your back. Some people don't forgive. L." "Maya," she whispered. "L," she whispered. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe Liam, maybe someone else. Either way, be careful." She nodded, the old fear returning for a moment, but this time coupled with resolve. "We're not hiding," she said. "We're facing it." I folded the note and put it in the drawer. In the night that followed, we both lay awake thinking of all the things we could lose and all the things we had yet to build. If the town had expected this story to end in a final dramatic humiliation, they'd be wrong. This was a long arc, a slow burn, a public reckoning followed by private reparation. And for the first time since Jonas's note had landed in my hands, I believed the ending might not be revenge alone. It might be something more complicated, redemption perhaps, or justice wrapped in mercy, or a new kind of strength that neither of us had known we could stand on. But the road was only beginning. The year of conditions in the trust had just started, the town had just received its headlines, and there were forces, powerful, resentful forces, already moving in the background, watching whether we would collapse or climb. I tightened the tea cozy and listened to the wind through the eaves. The shelter clock ticked. Dawn would bring another day, another chance to prove we were more than our mistakes. And if someone wanted to challenge us, let them. We were ready.
The note in the drawer: "Watch your back. Some people don't forgive. L." Didn't leave either of us alone. It lived on the kitchen counter like a warning bell. We tried to ignore it. We failed. Within a week, strangers began to ask questions in ways that weren't casual. At the market, a tall man with ink-black hair lingered by the fruit stand and kept glancing at our house. On the bus, a woman with a camera phone pretended to take a photo of a shop window but aimed it where I stood waiting. On the corner, two men in cheap suits watched the house and spoke in low voices. The return of those glances marked the movement of dangerous water. People who liked money and hounded it for sport. Liam apparently left a wake of that kind of appetite: creditors, hustlers, and men who took threats as a business model. I called Samuel. "Mrs. Rowan, are you receiving threats?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Document everything. If anything escalates, call the police. I'll coordinate privately with a security consultant." I hated the idea of bodyguards, of turning our life into fortress and paranoia, but I also hated the idea of being surprised. We changed our routine. I started driving a different route to the grocery store. Maya learned to call when leaving the shelter. Samuel arranged discreet security checks at the properties. The men in suits faded once they realized we were watched. But one morning, as I opened the mailbox, a pebble hit the porch with a soft thud. Two photographs slid out and landed at my feet like cold birds. They were pictures of Maya, standing in front of the shelter, carrying boxes, handing out bowls of soup. In the corner of each photo, a third figure lingered, half in frame, a man with a narrow jaw and a scar along one cheek. On the back of the photo was another note: "Stop playing with fire. Liam doesn't forgive." Maya's hands trembled when she read it, and for a second I saw the old woman who had once sat beside Jonas in the hospital, helpless and frightened. I put my hand over hers. "We keep going," I said. "We don't flinch." She nodded. The resolve in her eyes was different now, harder, edged with fear, but also with purpose. Claire strikes. If the shadow in the photos was a storm, Claire Walters was an unexpected, bitter rain. Her columns in the local online magazine were already cropping up with thinly veiled jabs, snide op-eds about trust funds and public theatrics, and a piece calling the shelter a PR stunt. On the day of the town's annual charity gala, an event Claire used as a stage for her social perfection, she made her move. I had received a polite invitation. Samuel suggested we go. Public visibility might blunt the nastier gossip. Maya hesitated, then agreed. She had a dress that had been cleaned and altered, and she wore it like armor and apology. The room glimmered with chandeliers, polished glasses, and people who didn't want to read the full headlines. Claire descended the stairs like someone delivering a verdict. When she reached us, her smile was a blade wrapped in velvet. "Mrs. Rowan," she purred, "I'm curious. Are you planning to keep your daughter working at that shelter, or is this just a seasonal charity for publicity?" "Claire," I replied, "the shelter isn't seasonal. The people there need continuous help." "But don't you see," Claire said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "the optics are convenient. Rich widow plays heroine, her prodigal daughter learns humility, the town gets a feel-good stary. It's television without cameras." Maya's face flushed crimson. People turned. The murmur swelled like a tide. "You always take the most delicate things and turn them into a costume," Claire added. "Maybe you should let them stay real." A man at our table snickered. Claire's words landed like a pebble thrown into the pond, small and wide. Maya stood, heat and anger making her taller.
"I'm doing the work," she said, steadily. "I'm showing up. It's not for the cameras." Claire clicked her perfect nails against her glass. "Is it for the trust, sweetie, or is it for your conscience?" Maya looked at me. I could have stopped this. I could have taken Claire's head off with a sharp word. Instead, I reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "You earned every hour you put in," I said quietly, but loud enough for those near us. "And if Claire wants to judge us, she can stand in line with everyone else." The room shifted. Claire's smile faltered, tiny. She stormed off like someone refusing to finish a script. But the gala had done something else. It raised a faint, bitter alliance in the town. There were people who liked the drama, and those who feared a staged redemption. Where Claire had tried to belittle, she had also unintentionally seeded skepticism. Some folks now wondered if the shelter was an act. But the women who lived there, Rosa, Hina, Maribel, knew better. They were the truth that could not be polished. Legal twist, the hurdle in the trust. Samuel called again. "Mrs. Rowan, I've found something in Jonas's will that complicates things." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "There's a clause tied to the Harborview tenants. Jonas created an option for tenant buyouts under extraordinary circumstances. If a tenant can prove financial ruin due to family fraud, they can petition for permanent ownership, provided you sign a release. The catch is, this release would be irrevocable. Once you sign, you relinquish the option to reclaim that specific property permanently." My head buzzed. Why would Jonas put that clause in? "He wanted a safety valve for people who'd been wronged by powerful beneficiaries," Samuel explained. "It's compassionate, but the legal effect is significant. If you sign ceremony papers to return units to tenants, they could keep them forever." I could see the futures diverging like branches. If I signed the release to help the people who had lost everything to Edward and Liam's schemes, if I willingly empowered victims to own their homes, one of my possible uses of the assets would be gone. If I refused, I kept control, but I risked alienating those tenants and appearing self-serving. The clause was a test written in law. It demanded we choose between principle and power. And it asked it publicly. The moral crossroads, Maya's temptation. That evening, a tenant named Mr. Alvarez knocked on our door. He was stooped, with hands like a stonemason. He'd been one of the first to complain about an unfair eviction attempt on Harborview units when the building's ownership had been in flux. "Mr. Alvarez," he said, "we heard about the clause. If you sign, the families can stay. They can finally stop sleeping in shifts. They would have something to pass to their children." Maya stood behind him like a shadow. Her jaw worked. "I could sign," I said slowly, "but if I sign irrevocably, I lose the option to manage that property for other uses in the future." Alvarez took a breath. "You could kidnap and raise the rents," he said bluntly. "You could sell us out for profit. You could keep the power and make decisions for your family line. Or you could say the families who have been here through thick and thin finally own it in their names." Maya's hands balled into fists. She had never thought about legal clauses or irrevocable releases before, but she had seen Rosa and Hina and Mr. Alvarez come to the shelter and sleep on less than dignity for months. She had stood by while people wiped their faces on thin towels and told stories about the nights they had spent under broken ceilings. "Mom," she said quietly, "if you sign, you won't own that building anymore, but you will do something that lasts." The choice sat on the table like a loaf of bread, simple and heavy. I looked at Maya and saw the outline of the woman she might become. The moral test blazed bright. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "Do you trust me to do what's best? Not because I'm telling you to, but because you choose it?" She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were clear. "Yes," she said, "sign it." It felt like a small death, the signing away of an option. It felt like the first real proof that my daughter had learned to put others before a ledger. Samuel prepared the paperwork. I read each clause slowly, watching the ink dry like a confession. When I signed, the room seemed to inhale. For the first time since Jonas's envelope had landed in my hands, I felt like we made a decision that wasn't calculated for revenge. It was a gift disguised as sacrifice. Consequences and rewards. The next day, the Herald ran the headline. Rowan Trust signs Harborview Homeowners Bill, families secure long-term ownership. The town's reaction split like a wound opening to light. Claire's column called it theatrical spending. Others called it the right thing to do. Mr. Alvarez hugged me like a son. Rosa cried openly in the street. For every sneer, there were 10 quiet nods. Maya watched the notice with something like awe. She had just watched me make a decision that would cost her a flexible asset, but it also sealed a future for people who had been stepped on. "You did that because of them," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Not because of me?" "Because of both of you," I said. "Because you had to learn, and because they deserve it." She smiled, a thin, fragile line that grew steadier each day. But the paper also printed the scarred man's photos from the envelope. He had been identified as Liam Keller's associate. He'd been sighted in the area. The story fed interest in the threats. Threats rarely stop when you do the right thing. They complicate the moral satisfaction, like smoke in a room of sun. The first major moral test. A week later, a young woman named Sophia arrived at the shelter late at night. She had the hollow look of someone who carried more than her years. Her son clung to her skirt, small, scared, barely breathing. Sophia's claim was simple and brutal. She had a pending eviction because of a debt tied to a loan secured by her unit. The lender claimed the debt was valid because
Sophia's claim was simple and brutal. She had a pending eviction because of a debt tied to a loan secured by her unit. The lender claimed the debt was valid because her husband signed while drunk. The paperwork was messy. The bank was threatening to auction the unit within 10 days. We had options. We could use a portion of the trust to buy the debt, clear it, and keep the unit in the family trust, temporarily sheltering Sophia while we fought in court. Or, following the spirit of Harborview, we could execute the irrevocable clause for this single case and transfer the title to Sophia directly, if the law allowed a one-time exception. But the trust's conditions were clear: no direct access to funds for beneficiaries under my control, without evidence of long-term independence. Sophia, like many others, was not a beneficiary of the trust. She had no legal claim. Maya stood beside me, eyeing the paperwork. "We could pay it," she said. "Just pay the debt, use some funds, save a family. Quick fix." "Then we keep the control," I answered. "We help now, but we control the outcome. Or we could set up a legal path for permanent ownership, but it requires time and lawyers and public risk." Sophia's little boy blinked at us, a toothy smile like someone holding a candle. The choice was sharp: use money now and preserve control, or use money and relinquish control. Or, the worst, do nothing and let a family be torn apart. Maya's face folded into a map of thought. The light inside her shifted. This was not an abstract problem. It had a child attached. "Mom," she said finally, voice thin, "we pay. Not to keep control. We pay because a child should have a home tonight." Her words were a blow of mercy. "Are you sure? That would use a portion of the emergency fund." "I'm sure. That family is a person in the world. We don't save theory, we save people." I studied her. The choice wasn't perfect policy. It was perfect humanity. "Okay," I said, "pay it. But we do it a different way. We pay the debt and transfer the unit to her name under a legal covenant that ensures stable ownership but allows the shelter to provide support if maintenance issues arise. We meet halfway: immediate shelter plus a structure that protects the asset." Maya nodded, relief and triumph flaring across her face. "We called Samuel. We paid the debt. We arranged the covenant." Sophia cried when she hugged her son, whispering thanks that sounded like prayer. That night, as the child slept peacefully in a bed not destined for an auction block, I felt the first clean warmth that comes from doing something with no return expected. Maya sat across from me on the back step, hands folded. "You did good," she said. "No," I answered. "You did good." She looked at the stars, unafraid. For the first time in months, the fear didn't fully own her. But danger still circled, and Liam's people were not finished.
The scarred man's image had triggered questions, and in the dark, men with small motives and big grudges sharpened their knives. We had built a fragile, bright patch of change. Now we had to guard it. And we would guard it with every measure we had left to us. The morning the storm broke, it wasn't lightning that split the sky. It was a single subpoena. Samuel arrived at our door with the official paper like a small, heavy bird. "They've issued an international warrant," he said. "Interpol's flagging Liam Keller. They want statements from anyone connected. And there's an offer on the table from one of his associates." I already knew which associate he meant, the scarred man from the photos, the same man who had sent the warnings and walked like a shadow through our small town. For weeks he'd haunted corners and edges. Now he was being offered a narrow path: cooperate, testify, and reduce his exposure. Maya stood behind Samuel with a paper cup of coffee, eyes bright with the exhausted determination of someone who had learned to stare down storms. The shelter hummed with early volunteer activity, children ran with damp hair, and Rosa shouted directions in a voice that could command a small army. "Are you going to talk to him?" Maya asked quietly. "We're not the prosecution," Samuel said, "but if he agrees to help, he could be the key to building a case that ties Liam to multiple scams across jurisdictions." "Then we go," I said. We arranged a meeting at a downtown diner with heavy booths and even heavier coffee. The scarred man arrived with a small, cowering presence that surprised me. He was not swaggering. He looked tired, older, in a way that a hand on the world's shoulder will do to someone. He introduced himself as Marco Velez. He did not deny the pictures. He did not deny the notes. He also did not deny knowing Liam. "I helped him move money," Marco said, voice dull. "I helped hide transfers. I did favors. I thought I was clever. Then he left us with the knives." "Why come now?" Samuel asked. "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder," Marco said, "and because I don't want to look at my kid and lie. I want a price, but I can give you everything I have." His eyes flicked to Maya. "You two?" he asked softly. "You. What he did to you? None of that was my idea." Maya's face hardened, then softened. "It doesn't matter whose idea it was," she said. "You helped. But if you help now, we have a chance to stop him for good." Marco swallowed and nodded. He delivered names, wire transfers, shell companies, whispers that led to addresses in Dubai, and phone numbers that reached dead ends. Samuel fed every detail into a chain of evidence that began to look like a net. Weeks later, Interpol coordinated a discreet arrest. Liam was taken in a hotel outside Dubai, alone and angry, surrounded by men who'd once called him friend. The papers tracked the collapse like a weather system. He was flown under custody back to face charges in 2 countries and extradition requests. His empire of veneer collapsed in a series of quiet administrative slams. We watched the news from the shelter's small television, and for the first time in months, Maya let herself rest. She leaned her head on my shoulder and closed her eyes. Not because the storm was over, but because the center had shifted. The man who had been the cause of so much weight was no longer able to pull on strings. The trial. The trial was not a gladiator sport. It was legal paperwork, testimony, and the slow, grinding turn of a system that moves heavy things with heavy hands. Marco testified. He told the truth in a voice that did not seek mercy. He described transactions and late-night meetings and Liam's charm that hid cruelty. Prosecutors conferred, defense attorneys argued, judges offered at times the patience of granite. When the day came that Maya had to face a courtroom not as an accused but as a witness to the truth, she stood with her spine straighter than I'd ever seen. Samuel had coached her, of course, and Mr. Carter's team had counsel that guided the shape of statements. But it was Maya's voice, raw, honest, and unembellished, that mattered. She spoke about naivety and trust. She spoke about being dazzled by promises and blinded by promises that glitter. She admitted selling the cabin. She admitted taking the quick path. But she also told the court about the shelter, about the women who had once been invisible, and about the months she'd spent trying to undo the harm. The judge leaned forward. "Redemption is not a legal defense," he said. "But where crimes are concerned, cooperation and restoration can shape sentencing for accessories and mitigate personal penalties." In the end, the court case took months, hundreds of pages of evidence, and the testimonies of quiet people like Rosa and loud prosecutors like those who took big cases on the road. Liam was convicted in one jurisdiction for wire fraud, and extradition requests proceeded for others. Marco received leniency in exchange for his cooperation. Maya faced administrative penalties and a short custody hearing over a fraudulent loan, but avoided the harshest criminal consequences precisely because she had been proven a dupe, not a mastermind, and because she'd spent months actively making reparations. That did not erase the nights she had spent terrified and lonely. It did not erase the humiliations strewn across town, but it changed the moral ledger. The showdown, a town meeting. With the trial in motion, the mayor called a special town meeting to discuss the fate of the properties, the shelter, and the community's role in healing. The hall filled with faces, skeptical, curious, resentful, and hopeful. Claire was there with a notebook of sharp questions. Mr. Alvarez sat with folded hands. Rosa and the shelter's women sat together like a small carved army. Samuel presented the facts. The trust assets were legitimate. The Harborview transfer was legal. The shelter had already helped dozens. We had, I explained quietly into the microphone, signed Harborview over to the tenants under the covenant that protected them from predatory repossession. We had paid Sophia's debt. We had set up a small legal fund to help residents avoid future scams. "I know the town had reason to mistrust us," I said. "I know it looked like theater. I also know it looked like grotesque revenge at times. I will not apologize for making my child learn how to carry herself, but I will also not apologize for building a refuge for people who needed it." Claire rose. "Mrs. Rowan," she said, sharp as a blade, "how can the town trust that this isn't just a billionaire's whim? How can we be sure the shelter isn't a paper shield while the family keeps the silver?" Maya stood up without my hand guiding her. "Because I worked here," she said. "I didn't write an Instagram post. I did intake forms. I fed kids. I carried trash outside when nothing was clamorous about it. I applied for jobs and attended classes. I am not asking for forgiveness like a performance. I want to ask for trust earned." Rosa stood next, wiping her eyes. "When I had nothing, this house gave me a place. Not a press release. A bed. A name for my kids. That matters more than the gossip." The town murmured, then leaned toward, more quiet listening. Claire clenched her jaw, but the tide had shifted. People see actions. You cannot criticize a woman who has fed your children. The board voted to grant a small municipal grant to the shelter, a modest but symbolic recognition that community and charity sometimes grow in the cracks left by greed. The reconciliation. After the public victories and the legal paperwork, the most tender thing that happened was not in a courtroom or a headline. It was in a small living room in our house. Maya sat across from me with a stack of syllabi and enrollment forms. "I got accepted into the social work program," she said, voice quivering with the kind of quiet joy that comes from earned effort. I felt my chest tighten with a mixture of joy and something like relief. Jonas had wanted us protected. Jonas's letter had been the seed. The harvest had been messy, but we had gathered it. Maya had cradled it and changed it. "I'm proud of you," I said. She burst into tears, the way water bursts through a frozen dam. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." "For a sale? For pain you caused? For leaving?" My voice was even and careful. "You made terrible choices, but you also learned. The apology is not for making mistakes. It's for understanding how to repair them. You have. Keep doing it." She collapsed into my arms. We held each other like two ships meeting in a harbor after long, stormy sea. Epilogue, 1 year later. 1 year later, the shelter had become something the town could not imagine living without. The beach house operated as a transitional refuge. Morning routines filled it with laughter, elbow grease, and the smell of coffee. Harborview residents hosted a tiny garden on the roof and taught a weekend class on basic tenant rights. Maya graduated from her social work certificate with honors and had started a small apprenticeship at the city's family services office. She kept working at the shelter, but now as a coordinator, not because she needed redemption, but because she had chosen the work she loved. I continued to manage the trust, but differently. Many of the properties had been transferred under legal covenants that protected tenants and supported community programs. A small foundation had been created using a portion of Jonas's trust to fund legal aid for victims of financial fraud and to support women escaping manipulative relationships. Marco's cooperation had saved many more people than we could ever track in the press. He would never be absolved of everything he'd done, but he'd at least stepped into an uncomfortable position of truth. Liam would not be any larger than the charges and prison papers that folded him into a smaller reality. Claire wrote one last column titled, "When Change Shows Up in Dirty Clothes." And though she tried her usual knife, something in the piece was softer. She included a portrait of Maya volunteering at the shelter, hands covered in paint, and admitted that sometimes life looks messy when it's real. On a late spring afternoon, Maya
and I stood on the porch of the beach house and watched a group of women load boxes of donated clothing into a van bound for a nearby crisis center. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like a woman who was lucky enough to be taken seriously at last," I replied. She laughed, a small sound that tasted like a bell. "I'm lucky too. I got a second chance." "Make the most of it," I said. She nodded. "I will." "And Mom?" "Yes." "Thank you for being cruel enough to make me learn and merciful enough to let me come back." I hugged her then, and in the hug there was a kind of truce. No more illusions, no more pretending. There was forgiveness, and it was not easy. It was chosen every day. The world had not been made perfect by justice or by charity. People still broke things and made mistakes. But we had built a small island of repair, and more people came to shore each week seeking the same: a bed, hot soup, a lawyer who would listen, a woman who understood. The stars overhead were steady. The town below had changed in ways that would take a generation to fully understand. Jonas's plan, secret, stubborn, and strange, had not led to the cold vengeance some people expected. Instead, it had forced a reckoning and, in time, a rebuilding. At night, when the ocean breathed against the shore, I sometimes thought of Jonas's letter and smiled. He had wanted to protect me. He had wanted me to keep the secrets that could have been dangerous in the wrong hands. I had used those secrets not to hold power for myself, but to teach an expensive lesson and to build something that did not belong to just one person anymore. We were not perfect, but we were trying. And in a town that loved both drama and redemption, perhaps that was enough.